In this video, we're going to get to hear from the guy who's trained some of the biggest names in baseball. This is Ryan Chapman, and Coach Murph and I just sat him down and got to ask him all the questions that you'd want to ask about training some of the biggest names in baseball. He started Chapman Baseball Compound in Southern California and works with so many of the best high school, college, and pro players around. So let's jump into the interview, and then we'll get to see a tour of the facility as well. Without further ado, here's our interview with Ryan Chapman. We're with Ryan Chapman, owner of Chapman Baseball Compound, and this might be one of the most influential training facilities that you might have never heard of, and that might be intentionally so. We'll get into that. But we got to meet at an Angels game, and it was a ton of fun. Now he's brought us in, been showing us around, and now we're going to get to sit down with him and ask him a few more questions. So,
first off, why were you at that Angels game again?
Seeing a couple of my guys pitch in the game, actually. I don't watch a whole lot of baseball when guys that I have aren't playing, to be honest. Trying to prioritize getting out to see guys. Angel Stadium's always good because it's so easy in and out, and we had three guys that game. We were sitting next to each other coincidentally and struck up a conversation, and we're here.
And you were kind of given a framework of what your career looked like and how you got to this point. Can you just summarize that again?
Yeah. So, I played pretty much, all through high school and college. I ended up getting drafted. I very quickly found out that I didn't enjoy playing as much as one would think, right? So, I was always driven to do things differently. I had to catch up because I didn't start playing at an early age. I started a lot older comparatively.
What age?
I started playing, really taking it seriously. My first year was when I was 12.
Wow.
I really started taking it seriously when I was 13 or 14. I have an addictive personality, and I really, loved it and wanted to continue to get better. So I pushed and pushed and pushed, and it's not like it was now where I can go on Instagram and find you guys or find us and, seek us out. YouTube really wasn't even a thing for me in high school. So I was in the mud, looking at stuff online and on forums and blogs and stuff like that. I was a catcher in high school. I went to Cal Poly as a catcher, transferred to Santa Ana to start pitching. And I was just obsessed with the training component of it. And that's one thing that I've always been able to do is find new information, deploy out new information with my specific career and friends that I helped coach along the way while I was still playing, and fortunate to where I had a lot of trial and error. I always had a kinesiology kind of thought process and background even when I was in high school. Me being able to vet certain things early on was, I think, crucial for that feedback process, to where I didn't have a lot of failures in terms of coaching and things that we've tried, which was super fortunate. Once I got into pro ball, I found out real quickly, I was like, dang, I really not a big fan of playing. I love training, and one of my pro clients who I trained with before he was actually one of my clients, him and I were training together. He would ask me questions all the time about my training, and he goes, I feel like you like training more than playing. And I said, you're exactly right. And he goes, I'm the opposite. He goes, I train so I can play. He goes, but for you, it's just really different. And go figure, now he's one of my clients, which is kind of weird. I started CBC in 2016, but I've been coaching since 2009, and I basically used the things that I had learned while I was playing and studying and coaching and all of it, for athletes that were 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's built into this, 8 years later.
One thing I find really interesting is that you said you started playing competitive baseball or more serious baseball at 12 or 13, which a lot of parents right now, youth landscape would say is crazy, because when they start at 10, they think they're so far behind.
They're behind.
So you started at 12, and now you're one of the best comprehensive pitching and just baseball guys there. You said you have a kinesiology kind of thought process, which means what exactly? You think of things of the movements.
Yeah, totally. So I don't necessarily think of hitting or pitching or throwing, whatever it is, in terms of the baseball mechanical lens. I think there's a lot of pitfalls of that. So I've always approached it in terms of just human movement. We weren't born to be baseball players, but there's certain things that we do in baseball that are innate to everybody. Whether how good you are at those things is to be determined. Some guys jump higher, some guys run faster, some guys rotate better. So I like to think of it on the holistic level of just pure movement. How efficient is the movement? I don't think of it as the mechanical stuff, because I said, I think mechanics, a lot of that lens comes from a bias that someone personally has. So you can ask 10 really good pitching coaches to dissect a guy, and you'll get 10, maybe more different answers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when it comes down to describing movement, that's a language that everyone can get on the same level with once they take out the bias of certain type of patterning, right? So I was fortunate from a young age going into high school. I knew I wanted to major in kinesiology. I wanted to learn about movement, learn about human performance enhancement. And I didn't change my major, which is a big thing that people do. Yeah. So basically when I got into college, I was able to speak that language and know all that anatomy and those terms and all of that stuff before I even got there, because I had been implementing it throughout my playing career for so long. Going back to like Lee Fiocchi, Mike Reinold, Eric Cressy, I found out about them well before I was in college, and their content and their information and their courses was like graduate level stuff. But I had taught that to myself through those avenues before I ever got to college. So when I took my, my physiology or my anatomy classes, like I had been doing that for years on end. I just really didn't think of it that way. I really pride myself on, like we have Mankind here, being able to have a conversation with them, and they're at the top of the field of how well they conduct business and how well they take care of people. So I can have a conversation with them. I can have a conversation with a surgeon. I can have a conversation with our director of strength, and then go on the hitting side and know hitting and take care of my pitchers that I currently do on a daily basis. That comes from nothing other than, I don't think of myself as like a pitching guy or a hitting guy or a baseball guy. It's like a movement proficiency type of skill set. So where you can touch base with all of those people instead of, I'm in my corner of, I'm a pitching guy and I pigeonhole myself into that, and I don't know hitting and I don't know lifting and I don't know recovery.
That is probably one of the biggest separators and advantages that you have, because a lot of feedback comes from people that specialize, but when it's for one player, then one player's hearing 10 different voices, whereas you know holistically like the whole A to Z, and you can be the one voice that's presenting feedback.
I try to be, at least, right? I put a lot of pressure on myself to uphold a certain level of information, a certain standard of like continuing to push the needle forward in terms of like what is being taught, what are we teaching these guys, how are we conveying it? And there's only so much you can do, and I know that. I do put an extraordinary level of pressure on myself to maintain that type of standard, if you will. At the end of the day, it's getting guys better and seeing them perform better on the field, and that's literally all that matters.
Who are some of the bigger name players that you train with?
Geez, I mean, I think people can find that out if they look hard enough, right? I don't really like to put names out there a whole lot. I think that's easy. Just like putting a sign on the, on the outside of the building. We'd get a ton more people in the facility, but at the end of the day, that's not the goal. If people are looking us up and they're the type of player that we train, you'll be able to find out who we work with. Maybe not everybody, to be honest. Like there's pretty big names in baseball that we work with that no one knows we have any contact with. I'll just say we're very fortunate to get to work with a lot of the guys that we do. That's not lost on me. Like we're extremely lucky to be able to do that. So it's cool when some of the big name guys that we get to train come in here, pop in, and the kids are training right next to them on the floor.
That's pretty cool, and especially baseball is very showy now. I feel like it's kind of cool to have that culture where people come here, it's like background work.
Yeah, totally. Like there's countless times where guys come in at 7 a.m, before they go on a road trip flight. So stuff like that is really cool, and we really try to uphold that. And of course, there's some things that we post, on Instagram, but generally speaking, like we're pretty quiet. We don't have a massive following.
It's kind of the goal.
It's kind of the goal. So my gauge is if we can do this well as a company for our players on a wide scale, which we are, with a very low footprint of us being boisterous of who we are, that's a pretty good accomplishment, because at the end of the day, it really just comes down to, hey, I know about you because you guys do good work, or because we know you guys really go to the nth degree to get stuff done.
I think you touched on it earlier. It sounds like it's the way you've cultivated all the culture that you have in here and just how people work and stuff first starts with the people. Because it sounds like if you get one person in here that works hard, they're going to bring someone else in that works hard, or just seeing someone else have a standard of work ethic makes them rise to that level.
The culture aspect is something that, of course, it's ongoing consistently, right? And
you can see it in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Everyone's getting there working.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere you look.
Yeah, and that's what we really pride ourselves on. And like we said, that vets a lot of itself. The players vet a lot of who they refer. I had a conversation not too long ago with one of our strength coaches, and they wanted to bring in more types of athletes in here. And they said, it could be difficult because it's a baseball facility. I said, it is, but our business is actually people. It's not necessarily training. How I go about running the company, how we go about building the company is really, like I said, going the extra mile for the person in front of us, which is the athletes, or for me, my employees and the athletes.
Training just happens to be the vehicle.
Exactly. Exactly. We're in the business of the human movement component, and we're in the industry of people.
So one more question that I do want to hit on. I think that's a brilliant point, and why, again, there's been so many people that have been so loyal to you for so long too, which just speaks to not only how good you are, but also how good you treat people too. But one of the things that we were talking about that I thought was so impressive was how you would like program like a client, like, hey, you're in the bullpen today, inning 1, inning 2. You know, these are obviously some of the big league clients that you're working with, but like talk through some of the principles of what you would do for a client, like how you think through that kind of stuff.
You know, a lot of it depends on where that athlete currently is. The higher up the ladder we go, obviously I like to equate it to like a pyramid, right? At the base, there's a ton of people, there's a lot of numbers, and the higher up the pyramid we go, the smaller and smaller that population gets. So you can think of that in terms of your funnel of business, but you can also think of it in terms of how specific you need to be with that athlete, the higher and higher up we go. But of course, if we have a guy who's a 10-year big leaguer and is extremely nuanced, there's things that are so small that we need to hit on to get him 0.0001% better that the kid in high school doesn't need to get to that point yet. And quite frankly, if we did give that to the high school player, it would be very short-lived because there's bigger blocks that need to be taken care of. Every single person is a very complex organism. They need something individual at different points of time, right? So like we change things very frequently on their warm-up, on their exercises, their plyo drills, their catch play routine, their bullpen stuff. It's a consistent upkeep of checking in, testing, how's progress, what do we need to change, what do we need to implement, what do we need to pull back on, what do we need to add more gas to. The higher up you go, the way more specific you need to get. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it turns into like we just need to continue to push that needle a little bit farther, a little bit farther, a little bit farther.
Yeah, and I like how you're giving kind of like the pyramid or the funnel example. So at the base layer, like if you have faults there, it's hard to make the nuance changes.
Oh, of course.
So especially with the youth players, like I coach mainly like 10 to 13-year-olds or so. So there's a lot of fundamental just bad movements made, for example.
Yeah.
So what would you say are the biggest things that you see, like the biggest building blocks that you attack to make a player have that initial improvement, especially at the youth level?
Well, this could be multifaceted, right? It could be on the pitching side, it could be on the throwing side. A good blanket to cover both of those two is education. Right, educating the athletes is huge, and that's what we really value. So when we're talking to agencies, clients, parents, coaches, we really reemphasize that, hey, we don't overpromise anything, but one of the things that we do really promise is building education that scales. What I mean by that is we're not teaching someone to be the world's best 10-year-old pitcher. We really educate every athlete on what they are currently doing and how that is going to get them better at the next level and the next level and the next level.
So as you can see, we talked about a lot of great things, but one of the biggest things that stood out to me was his emphasis on proper movement. This is really important for me, as I stress the biggest problem that catchers have is not knowing how to move, but he even takes it to a bigger level and takes it to the kinesiology foundation of what are movements that humans do, how do we do those the best that we can, how can we take that, turn it into a sport to enhance the performance the most. Another thing that really stood out to me from this conversation and from another conversation that we had previously was how personalized and actionable he makes all his programs with all his different athletes. Where if he has a guy that's in the bullpen, he's literally giving them step by step, inning by inning, here's what you need to do to make sure that you're staying on top and ready to go in the game. And then finally, one of the things that I took away was that he's so good at the mechanical side, at the pitch design side, at the analysis of spin rate and of slow-mo cameras and all of these different skill sets that really puts him in this unique category of one that many other people might be good at one thing or maybe even two things, but his overlapping skill set of everything that he does really helps him differentiate himself, and which is why a lot of the best guys want to work with him specifically because he can do all of it. And so a big takeaway for you is that whatever your concentric circles are, as many of those as you can stack together that makes you unique, oftentimes the more opportunities that creates. So keep building skills. Now let's go on to the next portion of the video where he gives us a tour of his facility and we get to ask him a few more questions about training specifically.
This is Mankind Physical Therapy. They started with us in 2021. Now they've exploded. They'll have three 3 spaces within ours. They handle all of our big league guys, all of our college guys, and anyone in the like. They do specialize in baseball with us a lot, obviously, but they do football, track, basketball, pretty much anyone under the sun.
So non-baseball athletes coming here to...
Oh, yeah. Volleyball players, basketball players. They kill it with football as well. Here's the weight room. So we have 5 full-time dedicated strength coaches that handle all the programming. Everyone who comes in our gym gets assessed, multiple layers of assessments, but every single person has their own program written head to toe for them based on goals, timeline, what they need, injury history, all that good stuff. It's an open floor concept, but everyone is doing their own head to toe individual stuff. Every guy will basically get their own dedicated strength coach for them. We do swimmers, volleyball players, baseball players, soccer.
Has it always been like that, or is it just baseball the next day?
So it started out as just baseball, obviously, but it's grown into a pretty vast array of athletes.
How would you say, like the breakdown is from like pro to college to high school to women?
Honestly, our honey hole, most of our clients, overwhelming majority, are like higher level high school and then college and pro. That's where our big ticket, most of our population comes from. We do have a full youth program that we get athletes to transition into this specific program.
But people that are traded here are typically...
Oh yeah, they're highly motivated, high level, high school, gonna play college, probably going to pro, and pro being an established, big leaguer.
I noticed you mentioned how a lot of your business is word of mouth.
Yeah.
I noticed you don't even have your logo on the building. Is that a building thing?
No, that is a preference. My initial thought process was the type of athletes that we're trying to get in here aren't people that are walking on the street and saying, oh, that's a baseball place, let's go train there. We have logos, subtle logos, but we're not overly crazy about it. We let kind of the brand speak for itself. Then here's the floor. So overflow from the gym, obviously, sprinting, bounding, jumping, speed development, athletic development out here. And then on the pitching side of things, looks crazy, but it's highly individualized. So every guy that's on the floor is doing his own thing based on goals, assessments, all of that good stuff.
So when they get in, they're assessed, given a plan, then they can show up and perform.
Yep. They have to schedule, obviously, so we know who's coming in and we know what the plan is. All the drills, all the exercises, cool downs, warm-ups, all of that stuff is for them as an individual. Same thing on the hitting side as well. We see up to 9 hitters an hour. We have 5 hitting coaches at the moment.
Can you speak to how important that is? Because even at like a basic level, just showing a player the video without the tools and like the high-speed camera, how important is visual learning?
It's huge. That's basically what CBC was started on initially. We didn't have, when we opened, all the tech that we do now, but we did have iPads because they're relatively easy to get a hold of. And just knowing the athlete, how they're looking at their movement and how they're feeling their movement, and us being the gap to be able to actually get them to see what's really happening, video is super, super important. So we're not just, scrutinizing everything that the athlete is doing. We need to be very, precision-based and precise on what we're doing, how we're conveying it.
Overall, here are some of my big takeaways from talking to Ryan Chapman. 1, each individual is different. One of the biggest things that we're trying to solve is whatever movement inefficiencies they have, and we're trying to personalize and attack those weaknesses and get them up to standard as quick as we can. 2, the athletes that train together from the highest levels to even just advanced high school, they all have one thing in common, which is passion. It becomes much harder to be great at something if you don't really love it because it requires a ton of work and sacrifice. And 3, visual learning is so important. Whether you have high-tech slow-mo cameras or you just have an iPhone, being able to get yourself on video and visually see what you're doing and make the correct adjustments based off of that is critical if you want to play at the highest of levels. So huge shout out to Coach Murph for setting it up and to Ryan Chapman for letting us interview him and give us access into one of the best brains behind baseball performance in the game right now. It's really awesome meeting you, really awesome seeing the culture that you had created at your facility, and I'm rooting for you guys. I'm Coach Bougie, and if you liked this video, then you might like this video right up here where we interview some other MLB players about catching, and I'll catch you later.